Viewers, you're with the hard facts, broadcasting out of CNN News 18 and Federal Bank Primetime Studio. Viewers, India is an inclusive democracy because its Hindu majority is secular to a fault. Till now, this often repeated quip was regarded as part polemic and part pop sociology. Not anymore. Now it has transformed into an unshakable fact. Data furnished by a top economic panel proves that at least in South Asia, countries with a Hindu majority are most tolerant and those with Muslim majorities are the least accommodating of minorities. A study prepared by the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, or the PMEAC, covering a period of 65 years from 1950 to 2015 has established this. The data recorded by the panel shows that in South Asia, and I quote, all Muslim majority countries witnessed an increase in the share of the majority religious denomination except Maldives, where the share of the majority group, which is Shafi Sunnis, declined by 1.47%, unquote. In Bangladesh, the study concludes, quote, there was an 18% increase in the share of the Muslim majority religious group. 18%, which is the largest such increase in the Indian subcontinent. Let's look at that data. It's on your screens, viewers. That's Bangladesh there, straight off the bat. In Pakistan, there was an increase of 3.75% in the share of the majority religious denomination Hanafi Muslim and an overall 10% increase in the share of total Muslim population despite the creation of Bangladesh in 1971, unquote. And look at that, viewers. 80% decrease in Pakistan of the Hindu population. Unfortunately, in Pakistan and Bangladesh, the rise in the population of Muslims has meant that the second largest demographic, the Hindu community, has shrunk alarmingly. Look at that, viewers. In Bangladesh, the Muslim community increased 20%. And the Hindu community, viewers, has come down plus 60%. Plus 60% drop. If you just press the continue button on that Bangladesh graphic, viewers, we'll be able to see that. In Pakistan, the Hindu community declined by a staggering 8%, and in Bangladesh, by an equally propitious 66%. Clearly, Hindus are teetering on the brink of extinction in these nations, and it doesn't take rocket science to figure out why. A glance at the headline-grabbing reports of atrocities against Hindus in Pakistan and Bangladesh clearly establishes religious intolerance as the principal motive. Now, in sharp contrast, in India and Nepal, which are both Hindu majority countries, we talked about the Muslim majority countries, viewers. We talked about Bangladesh and Pakistan, and you saw what happened to the second largest minority there, which is the Hindu minority, eviscerated. But in India and Nepal, which are both Hindu majority countries, the share of the majority or Hindu population dropped noticeably by 7.8% and 4% respectively. Unlike in Muslim countries where the majority, which is the Muslim majority, increased. Here, in India and Nepal, the majority community share, the Hindus, has decreased. In fact, in both India and Nepal, the population of minorities, on the contrary, rose appreciably, and particularly so in the case of Muslims. The data clearly establishes that Hindus who are not ordained to swear by one infallible God are more tolerant of diversity. And this becomes even clearer when one looks at demographic trends in non-Muslim and non-Hindu South Asian nations. The high-powered panel's reports reveals that, quote, Sri Lanka and Bhutan have witnessed an increase in the share of the majority religious denomination between 1950 and 2015. So, viewers, while in these countries the Buddhist population is increased, in Sri Lanka it has increased. the Hindu population has come down. In Sri Lanka, the share of the majority Theravada Buddhist population increased by 5%. In Bhutan, the majority Tibetan population, Buddhist population increased by almost 18%. In these Buddhist majority states too, the Hindu population has taken a beating. In Sri Lanka, the share of Hindu population declined by 5%. And in Bhutan too, it declined from 23% to 11% in the same period. The implosion of the Hindu majority population in non-Hindu majority South Asian states stands out for another striking reason, viewers. The panel report notes that Hindu share of the population shrank in Muslim or Buddhist majority nations at a time when across the world the share of minority populations increased on an average by 22%. So viewers, in Christian Europe, for example, the minorities there increased, their population increased. In other nations, specifically in India and Nepal, which are Hindu majority, the minority share increases. But viewers, in South Asian, Muslim nations, that trend is not observed. There, the minority population is just plummeting, alarmingly so. To conclude, the study proves specifically with respect to India that those who claim that Muslims in India are under threat are spreading baseless canards. Now, you know what is being said, viewers. You know what these politicians have been saying, specifically politicians in the opposition. You have politicians who've come out and made some very strange remarks. Let me take you through some of them. Asaduddin Owaisi says, situation of Indian Muslims is similar to Jews under Hitler's reign. You've got to be kidding me, viewers. The data is pointing at different trend. Here in India, the Hindus are going down and the Muslim share is increased, viewers, by 43%. And he's saying, this man on your screens, Asaduddin Owaisi, who will never give me an interview, he says, viewers, situation of Muslims in India is similar to Jews under Hitler's reign. Can you believe it? Rahul Gandhi, what's happening to Muslims now happened to Dalits in 1980s. Viewers, not only are they getting more than their share of population when it comes to state resources, but their population is also growing. Maria Alam Khan, Samajwadi Party leader, says Muslims must wage vote jihad against BJP to protect themselves. They're thriving, viewers, Muslims in this country. As the data shows, the opposite is true. Minorities are not just protected, but thriving in India. In fact, it could be proposed that it is Hindus who are facing existential pressures, demographic existential pressures in Nepal and India that may lead to them becoming a minority in the decades ahead. Now, don't scoff at this. Don't laugh this off. This might seem improbable today, but don't rule it out. The study, that same study, has adduced enough examples of countries where in just 65 years, between 1950 and 2015, the majority has become the minority. Plenty of examples. It can happen. And remember, viewers, in India, there are certain undocumented things happening. It's not just fertility ratios. There's illegal migration going on. And there are conversions. There are plenty of cases where there are proto-Christians and proto-Muslims. We don't know how many conversions are taking place. These are very camouflaged. We don't even know the extent of the migration. There are whole districts in this country, viewers, which have become minority positive, minority dominated, minority majority districts. So viewers, anything can happen in the future, but let's first speak to Shamika Ravi, Dr. Shamika Ravi, who is one of the authors, one of the three authors of this report. She's also part of the PM EAC. Dr. Ravi, what are the key takeaways from this study?
Rahul, this is a study we've been doing for the last 8 months or so, and it is a joint exercise with two of my colleagues, Apoorv Mishra and Abraham Jones. Basically, this was a study using a novel new data set called the Religious Characteristics Data Set of States, which is put together by a group of scholars in the US universities. But this looks at religious demographics transition globally, so across all countries over several long time frames, several decades. So what we do is we were interested in looking at what is happening to minorities across different countries. And so we study 167 countries from 1950, because this was right after the wars, and this was the beginning of sort of the golden period of a stable economic growth across the country. So 1950 to 2015. And the main findings we see is, of course, from a relevance of India, that in India, what we have seen is an increase in the share of minority population, and a significant increase of almost 7.82, because it's countering the decline in the majority. And the change that you're seeing in India is similar to what you're seeing in terms of, globally plural liberal democracies of OECD countries, the Western, more richer parts of the world. And quite contrary to what is the case in our neighborhood, where minority populations have actually shrunk alarmingly in the last 60 years.
Right.
Other than that, I think exciting things are, in Africa and some of the degrees of change that Europe is seeing lately.
Well, Dr. Ravi, there's much interest in population replacement theory around the globe. Is this probable in the Indian context? Your study cites the example of other nations where majorities have become minorities in just 65 years.
Well, now ours is relatively modest if you consider a country like France, which has seen close to almost 30% decline in share of majority over this long time frame. There are several countries in Europe which are seeing, but remember the forces underplay, the different, we have, of course, we are not talking about any specific driving factor, because this is migration, this is natural, it's a rate of fertility rates, and this is conversion, right? And we are basically saying that the final share of minority in the population is like a final outcome of all these different policies and reality across countries combined. And so I think different countries have had different. In fact, we also look at a handful, around 10 countries, which have had minimal growth in the last 65 years. So they've had very stable populations, like Thailand, if you look at Iran, Turkey, Afghanistan. And also these are extreme cases. But there are countries which have seen varied degrees of change. But India is like, India is becoming more heterogeneous from that perspective. We are seeing a decline in the Hindu population, which is around 7.82, and a commensurate increase in not just minorities combined, but different elements of that. So we are seeing a significant increase in the Muslim population. We're seeing a significant increase in the Christian population, Buddhist population, and the Sikh population. In fact, the only religions whose shares have declined in 65 years are Parsis and Sikhs. But minority as a whole is actually growing in India, much unlike the neighborhood.
So let me ask you, is the impact of migration, especially illegal migration, conversion, potentially underreported, which could lead to a greater skew going ahead?
We will have to do a much more thorough analysis. For instance, in the African case, 24 countries had animism as the majority religion in 1950. And in the 65 years of the study period, none of those countries have animism as a major religion. And obviously, the forces at play there is conversion. Almost all of them have converted to either Islam or Christianity. Now, you have to study country by country. And in the Indian case, obviously, it's a combination of declining fertility. And there has been differential, of course, you're seeing convergence lately, but fertility rates have been significantly different across different groups.
Yes.
We do have cases of migration, but we have not measured it, because also, remember, some of these things have to be studied much more at a state level. The whole country does not see uniform changes. You're seeing pockets. And similarly, conversion. We will have to study more localized to see where is it that you are having drastic changes. And the reason I say drastic is because if you only leave it to natural sort of demographic changes based on just the fertility rate or birth rate, you are unlikely to see such big difference. So obviously there is element of migration and element of conversion which is at play here, but it's an empirical study and we will need far better data, far more granular data, and I'm not sure we have that in the public domain.
Okay, so tell our viewers what's new about the study apart from establishing that Muslim populations are growing at a faster pace in South Asia and that the Hindu population is shrinking alarmingly in both Nepal and India.
Well, it's a global study. It is showing that India is, it's a liberal plural democracy. It's not just Muslims, it's all minority groups, barring two, which are where you are seeing their share grow. And so this really flies in the face of a lot of, attempt to sort of term India as being majoritarian, or being particularly inhospitable to minority populations, because that is not true. I mean, clearly the data is telling you that minority populations across these different groups is not just changing, in small ways, but these are big changes that is happening in the country. So India is clearly conducive to, it's extremely hospitable, but not just, it's progressive. And the other thing to note, Rahul, is that not every country in the world has policies or even legally defines minorities. So countries like China, there is no legal definition of what construes minority. So clearly there are no policies which are targeting specific groups. And that is where I think India is again an exception. And that's why we are a true sort of liberal and plural democracy, because not only do we define minority, but we have a lot of policies. We have a Ministry of Minority Affairs. We have lots of policies, not just at the central federal level, but also at the regional and the state levels, which cater to minority populations. So in that sense, this whole narrative is clearly, it's all manufactured. And the reality in India is very, very different.
Well, many
more
say,
like Western liberal democracies.
Okay, so many say that the conclusions from the study will create fresh mistrust between Hindus and Muslims in India. What's your response? A lot of opposition parties are saying this.
Oh, that's absolutely untrue. That, it's the politics season, it is election season, you're going to hear all kinds of noise. The way to look at a study like this, frankly, the analogy I want to use is in the midst of the pandemic. When you put out daily statistics on the nature of the infection, one reaction would be, why are you putting out these statistics? Because when you tell us that things are getting better, people become relaxed and they're not going to be careful. At the same time, you would also hear people say, why are you putting out these statistics? It makes people fearful. And they'll be excessively alarmed. The point is, how can not knowing be better than either of these? And so the idea of this paper is to document scientifically, as objectively as possible in terms of available data, what is happening on the ground in India. And I think another fact one has to accept is that this study will not come as a surprise to any Indian data scientist, economist, scholar of demography, because these are not shocking numbers to them. We have always anecdotally known this. I think it's the context, the global context. It is the regional context within which, when you put the numbers together, it looks drastic.
Okay.
But there is nothing terribly surprising or new if you look at these trends.
So if there's nothing new, why release this data at all, according to you, Dr. Ravi? And many people are questioning the timing of the study, saying that it's being timed to the elections to help in polarizing the election, etc.
Again, Rahul, how can not knowing be better? I have also been asked, why didn't you put out this study 2 months back? I mean, why, so again, it's exactly the same as saying, let's not know. I think not knowing is never a good option, particularly for, scientific inquiry. The fact is that when we find data sets, as researchers, as scholars in the community, when we find something exciting, interesting, we are motivated to dig and do a rigorous analysis, an econometric analysis, and put it out in the public domain when the paper is ready. It's a working paper. We welcome absolutely welcome any feedback on the findings themselves. But if we are going to discuss motivations and intent, then I'm sorry, that we'll leave that to the political space.
Well, Dr. Ravi, thank you very much for giving us an insight into this study, beyond, of course, the numbers, putting it into context. Thank you very much. Let's open this up, viewers. Let me also bring in Mr. S. Gurumurthy, editor of the Tughlaq, to get a larger view, a more, perhaps, long-term perspective. What do we make of this data from a Hindu civilizational perspective? S. Gurumurthy, the editor of the Tughlaq, is here with us. Always a pleasure to speak to you, Mr. Gurumurthy. I just want to begin with certain assumptions. In Pakistan, Bhutan, Bangladesh and Lanka, Hindus, which were the biggest minority, are shrinking alarmingly. We've seen it now. The data is out there. This shows that Hindus are most tolerant, especially in the subcontinent. Would you go along with that view? And does that actually have some sort of an import coming out of this particular survey?
See, I think it is a much larger issue than Hindus being merely tolerant. Hindus are tolerant. Hinduism is tolerant, is a globally acknowledged philosophical determination. It's proved by history. It's proved by our political system. It's proved by our constitution. So it doesn't require any certificate from anyone, including demographic studies, that Hindus are tolerant. But this raises a much larger issue. The issue was first zeroed in on by the Center for Policy Studies in Chennai by three scholars, A.P. Joshi, Dr. J.K. Bajaj and M.D. Srinivas. Both of them IIT Kanpur scholars. They first said that demography in India is beginning to weigh against the Hindus. And they trace the pre-partition position for over 100 years to say that the Hindus have been gradually reducing, and particularly the Muslim population has been rising. And in 2003, they came out with the demographic study of India, which disclosed a stunning result, not only about the total decline in the Hindu population vis-a-vis the Muslim population. It went further to say that in the total fertility rate, the Hindus are far, far below the Muslims. That is, their replacement rate was 2.1 and the Muslim replacement rate is 2.4. This shows what will be the future trend, not only the current position. And this was updated by them in 2011 after the 2011 census, which disclosed much more serious situation of erosion in the Hindu population. And they said that by 2050, there will be a huge rise in the Muslim population and a huge fall in the Hindu population. And in the subcontinent, they said by about 2061, totally taking into account Pakistan, India and Bangladesh, the Hindus will be in a minority. Okay. You know, demography is destiny. That such a serious issue is being trivialized in India shows our intellectual bankruptcy. The idea of India, the constitution of India, the minority-majority relationships and the welfare of the entire Indian population, which is the largest in the world today, depends upon Hindu majority. If Hindus are not in majority and imagine Muslims are in majority, what will happen in this country? So I think it is not merely whether Hindus are tolerant or not. It raises a much larger issue that seeing the Muslim population rising is not the index of Hindu tolerance. It actually means that there is a minority majority imbalance in the state of mind. The minorities think that they must proliferate, and the majority conforms to the national policy of family planning.
Well,
And this has resulted in a huge imbalance in the total fertility rate that
yes.
is now weighing heavily against the Hindus and in favor of the Muslims.
Well, the study shows that population replacement theory could hold true for India, as there are many examples of countries where the majority became the minority.
You see, the important point is this also creates a state of mind that not only among the minorities, but even among the political parties, that it is only a matter of time. And once this kind of mindset comes to prevail in body politics and in the public discourse, this can become irreversible. So I think better late than never. Now we have got to have a proper policy. In fact, even the Uniform Civil Code was intended by the constitution makers to address this problem. There has to be a demographic balance between all the communities. All will grow together. All will balance, so that the numbers do not, the imbalance in numbers do not affect the character of the nation itself, the idea of the nation itself, and the body politic. I think that was why the UCC was made integral to the Constitution of India, and at least 24 times the Supreme Court said it should be brought in, and it is so delayed. The result is for all of us to see that the fertility rate of Hindus is far less than the fertility rate of the Muslims, according to the National Family Health Survey study 2019-21. And actually the study of the Economic Advisory Council is a very, very delayed study. The Center for Policy Studies, of which I was also one of the trustees. Of course, I didn't contribute much to the study. It was done by the scholars. This came out in 2003, 21 years before. And it forewarned the nation with historical data. And nobody took notice of it. And it is one of the most scholarly studies, undisputed. And now, because it has come through the National Family Health Survey and subsequently the Prime Minister's office, it has now acquired, and particularly in the context of the election, it has acquired some status as a point of discourse.
Yeah, but
we have been very foolish.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate. And viewers, I could have reduced this into a real shout fest between two sides, the Hindu side, the Muslim side, but we're not doing that. We are speaking to people who can put these things into context from a larger national and civilizational perspective for all of us. So, Mr. Gurumurthy, one side, as you've said, the political establishment refuses to acknowledge the import of such studies, linking them to an attempt to demonize the minorities. What do you make of this?
See, look at what is happening in Europe today. Of course, in Europe, the problem is different. Our Muslim population is unlike the Muslim population of Europe, who have come from other parts without any cohesion among themselves except the idea of religion. But our Muslims are not like that. They are connected by language, they are connected by culture, they are connected by astrology, they are connected by so many things locally. So, the idea of Pan-Islamism was a product of politics. It was not a product of Indian sociology. It was a product of politics, and it was accultured in 1920s and effectively made part of our law by the All India Shariat Act of 1937, which I always hold as the first step towards creating pan-Islamic mind, which led to the creation of Pakistan. But Post-partition, this will have been corrected, should have been corrected by the body polity of India, particularly the Congress party, which had the capacity and the responsibility and the moral obligation to correct the partition distortions, continued with it and with more vigor. And with vote bank politics, it got legitimized. And it has become acceptable to say that the rise of Muslim population is not a danger because they are also part of the Indian society. No doubt. But when there is imbalance, that somebody is part of the Indian society in a democracy and well connected to the world over, and with ideas coming, money coming, and connections being established in after 1970s with the extremist ideas, this cannot be taken as a normal course in our country. So I think there has been a complete failure of the political system, public discourse, intellectualism, and even the courts, except the UCC part.
Yeah.
Even the courts did not take proper cognizance of the threat that is emerging. And I think that this study which has come, it is not a study, it is actually a compilation of data. Which is already established. It is not that the PMO, this Economic Advisory Council has done any research on its own. It is already research done, data in the public domain, which it has put together, and it has not reached any new conclusion. The conclusion is also there in the public domain. It is there in the National Family Health Survey. It is there in the Center for Policy Studies Demographic Study. We must understand demography is destiny. If you miss out on demographic balance, our destiny will become imbalanced.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Gurumurthy, for putting that into a larger sort of political context, larger civilizational context. Now let's speak to Dushyant Sridhar, who's a Vedic scholar, to understand the theological impulses at work here. Dushyant Sridhar, we've been speaking to some distinguished people, and of course, it's always a pleasure to speak to you too. Now, I want to ask you, and let's, put niceties aside, political correctness aside. What this tells us is that Muslim societies are the least tolerant in South Asia. Why is this the case?
Namaskaram, Rahul, and namaskaram to all the viewers. Advance wishes for a very prosperous Akshaya Tritiya. Given those wishes, honestly, Rahul, be it you, me, or anybody, we want every community, every citizen of Bharatadesham to prosper.
Yes.
So this small talk that both of us are having, or you have been having, is not to demonize a certain community.
Absolutely.
It is in no way. So we are trying to look to the root cause. See, what happens is every religion has its own sets of theological tenets and beliefs. And Hinduism has, and Islam also has. And over a period of time, we do find that there are some practices which need to be abhorred, certain practices that need to be curtailed. So, time and again, every religion needs certain reformers and reforms. Hinduism is no alien to it. There have been reformers in the past, and the religion with some reluctance here and there. But overall, there has been an acceptance that reforms are required. I honestly feel, as a very responsible citizen, that Islam, I'm not talking about the global Islam, at least like how Sri Gurumurthy did speak about the Muslims of Bharatadesham, we are all connected by the civilizational ethos. At least the Islam that pertains to Bharatadesham, the scholars should come together and look for reforms. I'll tell you why. See, for example, to say that one community has seen a drastic increase in its population, people will say, then you produce babies. Why aren't you producing? The problem here is, along with good education, we also understand that when we produce more children, we have additional responsibilities. We have only certain number of resources with us. We need to give good education to that child. So adding 4, 5, 6 babies is not the motto, but how much of quality education we have been able to give. And there are also studies done in the recent past to suggest that lesser the education levels in a community, more the children. So this is also, see, when there is lesser education, lesser exposure to the better world, then there are chances for certain people to engage in
But this
better levels
theory,
of crime.
this theory that you are advocating, obviously it's logic, it's obviously logical, but it breaks down in the context of Europe, for example, where the education levels are high, but then you're seeing a population replacement going on there. Islamic populations there are growing. In some European capitals, there is almost a 30% jump in just the last 10 years.
Yeah. So when we see the increase in the population that we see in large European countries, it has to do with the immigrant population. It is not with the native population. One. And point number two, see, there is also a small area of doubt here, because if the education levels are low and so the number of children produced are high, it can be corrected because we can work on the education system. It may be a time-taking process, but we can work. But if the tenet itself states that only when you create a certain religion world, the world should be of a certain religion, then the motto itself will be to produce more babies, which is wrong. See, I'm not saying that this is the concept with Indian Muslims. People should not mistake me.
No, absolutely.
I'm just saying,
you're being
these
careful.
tenets. Yes. Yeah, I'm just trying to say that such tenets, such thoughts, that you have to create a homogenized world. So let me ask you this,
Dushyant Sridhar, there are many people who say that perhaps the concept of conversion now must be stopped in this country.
That's a very tricky thing, Rahul, because see, a religion has its own set of tenets, and people who are impressed with the philosophy and the theology should be given the right to convert. So there's no doubt about giving the citizens a right to convert. That should be given, and that is what our constitution gives. But this forcible conversion, see, for example, let's say a person converts from certain religion A to B. The only logical reason that the person converts is because B is more impressive to him.
Yeah.
Point number one. Point number two, he finds many social evils in religion A. These could be the only two reasons. It cannot be that I've been lured by money, I've been forced. Then such conversions won't work. Now here, let's say that people have converted to Islam because a section of the Hindus have gone to Islam. You see that rise could be another explanation given. In that scenario, if your tenets have attracted you to that other religion, then the social evil that you see in Hinduism is caste system. Yeah. Then why should there be OBC within the Muslim community?
Good point.
If you believe that you have left the caste system and gone to Islam, then you shouldn't be seeking reservation based on caste.
That's true.
Point number one. And point number two, if you believe that you want to homogenize and you want to harmonize with the rest of the community, what stops you from accepting the uniform civil code? See, for example, there are some scholars who suggest that generally there's a perception that polygamy rate is high in Islam.
Yes.
But they say with research papers that it is not so. If you believe that polygamy has been approved by Islam, but you also feel that currently the polygamy rates are not very high in Islam in the country, then accepting uniform civil code shouldn't be a problem because anyways there is no high levels of polygamy. Yeah. So the problem here comes, and there's another bigger problem, Rahul. We're just talking about one religion where there's an increase. We should also understand why there is a drastic decrease in the Parsis. Because at the end of the day, if the religion is also seeing a decrease, a drastic increase like what Parsis have seen, like what I think even Jainism has seen, that is also alarming. So community leaders from that community should make representations to the government. And probably we should understand, see, a plus or minus 1%, 2% in all religions is fine. That buffer, because we cannot produce, all of us cannot produce together. So, there can be. But this 43% increase is something that needs to be deliberated now.
Well, we leave it at this, Dushyant Sridhar. Thank you so much for giving us your time and perspective. Viewers, let's move on.